So really quickly, I just want to talk about the Blackmagic Micro Cinema camera. When I first got this camera from dvestore.com, they sent it over for me to demo. Uh, I didn't know what to make of the camera. Like obviously, I knew it had good quality. It had a great sensor. It was similar to the Pocket Cinema camera, but then they've added 60p, and you could shoot 60p in RAW, in HD. So I knew it was an amazing camera with an amazing sensor, but it was built kind of odd because it's mainly targeted for like drone use and remote use, maybe RoboCam use. So it's more for like remote control, not like physically hands-on. But I wanted to be hands-on. I didn't really want to use it remotely. So I was thinking about how can I do this? So when I started looking at the camera, it reminded me a little bit of like, maybe like a red camera, right? You get a box, you get a brain, no lenses, no monitor, nothing. It's a box. And to make it usable, you really just got to build it up. So you add a screen, maybe add a handle, throw on your lenses, a battery system, and then you got yourself a camera. So taking that same approach, I looked at the micro cinema camera as just like a sensor in a box, and then I just built around it. So for me, what I did here was now I added some rails here. I know, a lot of people say, well, it's a micro cinema camera, it's got to be tiny and small. But if you're adapting lenses, the lenses end up being bigger than the camera itself. So you really have to stand it up. And so here I've just kind of added a platform just to kind of raise it up. And then I've added rails in case I want to add like, follow focus or lens support. And then I mounted a 15 mil clamp here up at the top, and then a 15 mil rod that runs across with a side handle. And I kind of took the ergonomics of like, when you're holding, a red camera with the side handle and the monitors on top. So it's a little bit like that. As you can see, it feels like a camcorder. It's small. It's going to have really great, handling and resolution. And, I got my screen up here, and it's just, to me, just kind of like a camcorder. Got the little shoulder pad over here. And what I did for the battery system, a V-mount's just going to be way too big. The Canon batteries are way too small. So I went with the Sony batteries here. This is like an NPF 970 size, but I'm using the SWIT. And I did a video on this SWIT battery, why I like it. Built-in battery meters here in the back. It also has a DC output, so I can actually power the camera at the same time I'm powering my Blackmagic Video Assist monitor. Now, this is a Sony battery to the Blackmagic Micro Cinema, which actually uses a Canon battery. And if you looked at my other video, what I did was I made an adapter. So let's take this out. So I used a dummy battery from a Canon dummy battery, mated that with a Sony battery tray, and I made myself a little adapter here. So now I can use Sony batteries on this micro cinema camera. And the reason I wanted to do that was Sony offers high capacity batteries. So I get like 4 times the runtime. Instead of running, like a single Canon battery, I get 4 times the runtime. But here I'm also able to power my monitor at the same time. So really one battery is kind of like a whole battery solution for my camera here. Everything I need, done, one cable. Now, what I did here just to kind of experiment was I built a custom handle. And I've got these buttons here on the side. Now these buttons allow me to change some settings in this micro cinema camera. And then over here I have a button where if I press it, it'll actually go into recording mode, and then I unpress it and it'll record. Now, this is still, it's ugly. It looks like a prototype, but I just wanted to test it out so that I could 3D print and then maybe even make a custom handle for this camera. Now, if you've worked with this camera, you've got to dig into the menu. And to do that, the buttons are on the front here, tiny little buttons on the front of this camera. So for instance, if we wanted to change the ISO, we'd have to press the menu button, make sure we're in the camera menu. You hit play, and then you use the arrows to go down to the ISO. Hit play again, and then hit the arrows to change the ISO, and then menu to get out. That's a lot of clicks. Now that I've added these buttons here, I just click the button and I can toggle through my ISO very quickly. The reason why you could do that is, again, this camera was designed for remote use. And they've added an expansion port here that actually takes PWM inputs, right? So pulse width modulation inputs, or kind of servo inputs. They have both S-bus and some analog inputs. What I've done is I've tapped into the analog inputs. I'm not using PWM. As a matter of fact, I'm just jumping the wire. And this camera, what happens is, for certain settings, all it needs to do is detect a change in resistance. Once it detects a change in resistance, it says, hey, I'm gonna make a change. And then as soon as that resistance goes away, then it doesn't change. And that's basically what I'm doing here is I'm tapped into the serial port. I use my own serial connection here, my own HD15, which is like SVGA. And I found out which port to use, and then I just added some momentary push buttons. And basically what that's doing is it's taking the analog servo input and grounding it, and so that changes the resistance and the camera makes a change. So here I have 3 momentary push buttons, and these can be mapped. So you add your buttons to, like PWM 1, 2, 3, or 4, and then you would map it in the camera. So PWM 1 could be ISO, PWM 2 could be white balance, and then you have shutter angle, and stuff like that. Now for recording, it also can be triggered via a PWM input. Now, the way it works is if you were to momentarily push the button, it would go into record mode. But when you let go of the button, it would stop recording because there's that change in resistance. Now, here I had to do a push on, push off, so not a momentary. So when I push this on, then it's basically bridged, right? So then it goes into record mode. Now to stop, you push off. So this is on and then push off. And that will get it into record or not record. Now, these very, very basic controls won't work with everything. For instance, your focus or your iris, you truly need PWM because you have to vary your resistance so that you could tell it where to swing. But fortunately, I'm using manual lenses mostly, so I don't really care about iris, and I don't really need to autofocus because, again, I'm using manual lenses like this Rokinon here. So, these buttons have helped me tremendously to just kind of use it as a regular camera, run around and just shoot, push the buttons to change settings, start and stop record. I'm mostly just changing ISO from going inside to outside. White balance doesn't really matter when you're doing RAW. So there's a lot of things I don't really use. Shutter angle, not so much. I pretty much set it on 60p or something. Now, one of the things that I'd love to see from BlackMagic in the menu system is being able to change frame rate through PWM. Now, you could change a lot of stuff in the remote menu, but not shutter or frame rate, right? So I want to go from 24 to maybe 60 and then back to 24. So I'd love to see that as a PWM option, because I think if I just add a button and toggle through my frame rates, I'd be good. Anyways, it might be a little confusing, but what I'm going to do now is I'm going to cut to a close-up, add the breakout cables that come with this camera, and then show you just kind of the basic idea of how these buttons work, and then you'll be able to, kind of make it for yourself if you wanted to. So anyways, let's cut to that. Okay, so really quickly, let's just take a look at what we're able to see here on the menu. So if I go into menu and then I go into monitoring, I have to hit play, oops, wrong button. My overlays, hit play again, turn that on, and then menu out. Okay, so now we see some options here, like, our white balance. You also see our ISOs at 800. So let me show you when I press these buttons here. You'll notice that the ISO is changed now to 1600, 200, and 400, 800, So you see how easy it is to change my ISO now. And then if I want to change my white balance, I could press this button over here, and you'll notice that the screen will get warmer and then cooler because we're now at 2000, 3000, and we'll go back up to say 5000. So you see how I could quickly change my white balance and shutter speed, my ISO through these buttons, and basically these are mapped to the PWMs. Now, the bad thing about, well, I won't say a bad thing, but one of the cons about using this method here is it's only going forward, so there's no backward. So if I want to go, ISO 1600, so this is my ISO 1600. So let's say I want to go to ISO 200, 400. Oh, I want to go back to ISO 200. Well, I can't go backwards. I have to go all the way around until I'm back to 200, which, is not, again, not a real big problem because you could, there's not that many options for ISO and not that many options for white balance. There's a little more options in white balance and ISO, but still not bad to click this. Now let me show you what we have to do to naturally change the ISO without these buttons. I would have to go into menu, and then I would find my way to the camera where my ISO is at. I have to hit play. I have to drop down to the ISO, play again, and then change my settings. So if I want to go to 200, so I'll go to 200, and then I have the menu out. So now we're at 200. I don't really like that. Let me change it to 400. So we go into menu, play, go down here, play, hit your buttons. Let's go to 800, and then menu out. There's far more clicks than just, toggling this guy right here. So very, very simple, right? Anyways, and then for record, you'll see the record pop up over here if I have a card in here. Oops. Nope. I have no SD card. Let me grab an SD card and then I'll show you the record feature. All right, now we got the SD card in here. When I press this button here, you'll notice that the record icon shows up. And then if I press it again, let me show you this. There you go. So you see the record icon over here. If I press this again, you see the record goes away. So then I press this again. So that's how I'm able to control this camera and use it in a handheld fashion much more comfortably than, holding this little box by itself. One thing I failed to mention too in my little setup is I'm actually powering the BlackMagic Video Assist via 7 volts instead of 12 volts. Now, you guys know that this is a 12 volt input on the Video Assist, but I'm only using a 7 volt battery. So what I did here was I actually modified a Canon dummy battery, and I'm using that in one of the ports here. So these ports here are 7 volts. So I'm using a dummy battery to give it 7 volts out of my SWIT DC output here. So this is what I love about this little battery. It's cool, right? Anyways, let's dive into the breakout cables and kind of show you the basic functionality of how this works. Actually, before we get into that, let me show you the menu. So let me lower this so you guys might be able to see it better. So these buttons are mapped through the analog PWM inputs, and that is in the menu. So we go into the menu here, and then we go into remote. So here you could kind of see the PWM for record start and stop is set to PWM 3. And I have this button mapped to PWM 3. Now, if these buttons are mapped to like PWM 2 or so on, you'll see that it's down here. I have PWM 4 as ISO, my PWM 2 is white balance. I also have PWM 1 as shutter angle. So you can, again, map your PWMs, your analog inputs, to a function on this camera. So don't worry about, wiring up which button goes where. You can remap it later. Once again, you don't have an option to change frame rates. So I'd love to see 24 and then be able to toggle to 60 through PWM. So BlackMagic, if you're watching, get that into the firmware. Anyways, let's get out of the menu just because I showed you the PWMs. S-Bus is totally something different. You'll need a different module for that, but if you're trying to do something basic like this, the analog works great. All right. So this is the HD15 that I'm using, and it connects to the expansion port. Now, this is what BlackMagic provides for you guys. This monster cable right here that has everything you need from LAN or LANC to DC power input, all your analog servo channels, your S-Bus. So this is a servo channel 4, 2, 3, and I think this is 1. So here we have 4 different analog inputs for these servos, which normally work on PWM. And then you have all this extra stuff. So what we're doing is, if we plug this into the expansion port, these pins here are actually mapped to these servo. Well, they're mapped to everything, right? So let me plug that in. Oops. Back these out. All right. Now hopefully this makes sense to a lot of you guys. It's very simple, really. So here we have the different servo channels, and in each one we have 2 wires. So basically these wires are open, right? So they're just not connected. You would have a PWM controller here varying the resistance between the 2 wires, and then it would, you know, tell the camera to do something. Now, some of these inputs, like you know, my ISO and white balance, it's pretty basic. That if you just make a you know, continuity change, a resistance change, then it will trigger something. So let's see if I could show you that. I think my channel 2 was ISO, so I'm going to use a jumper wire. Hopefully this makes sense. And I'm going to put one in one side, and then I'm going to plug something in the other side. Let's see what happens. There you go. So I don't know if you could see, but my white balance is changing here. So as I tap on this, every time I tap on the this wire, if I'm jumping the connection, I'm actually toggling my white balance. So you'll see that it's changing. And basically what I'm doing is I'm just jumping this wire. So if I jump it, it will change, and then I just keep jumping it. Let's see. So it's actually changing right now, you guys. I don't know if you could tell, it's getting warmer and cooler. And it's just tap, 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 right? So every time you tap it, it makes a change. And you're just really jumping these 2 wires. And so what I've done is I've just got a momentary push button. So if you guys know what that is it's a button that's open, right? So this is open. And then when you push the button, it puts the 2 wires together. And it's called momentary because the moment you let go of the button, it opens up again. So that's where you have a momentary push button. Now I opted for some really tiny surface mount push buttons, but you could use any push button really. These are momentary. Now for recording, I think my recording was on servo 4 here. Servo channel 4. So again, you can map it to anything you want, but let me show you what happens with the recording. If you can see it up at the top there. If I jump my wire, oops, that's my ISO. PWM4 is my ISO, but you can see it's changing my ISO here every time I jump it. Maybe my recording's on 3. Let me go to 3. I think this is 3. All right, so let's try this again. I forgot what I mapped it to. All right, so if I put my jumper on, there you go. It's actually in record mode. Let me see if you could see that. Can you see the recording happening up here? And then the moment I take this jumper off, the record goes away. So if I put it back on, you see it's recording. So because recording, in order to go into record mode, it has to have a resistance change. And then when that change goes away, it stops recording. We cannot use a momentary push button because the moment we let go of the button, it stops recording. So here I've added a push on, push off button. So basically it's open right now, but if I push this button, you'll notice it stays half depressed because it's actually staying on. And then to turn off, I have to push off. So push on, push on. Push on, push off. So this is not a momentary. And that's how you would map this button to your recording. Anyways, it's that basic for you guys who want to build your own. But instead of using these cables, I use my own HD15. These are super cheap. You can get them for like pennies. And you figure out your pin outs on your expansion port for the different PWMs. Now, what I did was I shared my ground wire across all of my buttons. So on one side of your buttons here is ground, and then the other wire goes to PWM1, PWM2. So I'll have one wire for PWM1, one for PWM2, PWM3, PWM4, but then they all share the same ground wire. So there's two wires on each side. So one of the wires is shared on all of these. They're all together, but the other wire maps to PWM1, 2, 3, 4. So hopefully that makes sense to you guys. I'm not really much into I don't really do electronics very much, and I don't have a schematic for you, but hopefully that makes sense. It's pretty basic the way it works. So again, if I want to change my ISO, I just do it right here. So let's see, ISO, ISO, ISO. It's cool, right? Anyways, that's just a kind of a quick look at how I've mapped my buttons if you guys want to build it yourself, and also a tour on this little kind of rig that I built for this micro cinema camera, which I really like. I love this camera now because I'm able to just kind of pick it up and shoot like a camcorder. You'll notice that I also have a tripod mount underneath here, so it goes right from tripod to handheld, and it's just very functional. You get really good quality. The color science in BlackMagic is amazing. RAW is amazing. So really fun camera. Definitely worth getting, I think. If you guys are, shooting Micro Four Thirds, this is a really fun camera to get, and it's just under $1,000. Anyways, you guys are interested in this camera, I recommend you guys buy it from dvestore.com. Again, they sent this over to me to share all this info for you guys, so support them, dvestore.com, or visit my website, cheesycam.com. I'll also have some links below this video. If you have any comments, let me know.